What it do? Dream Team, it's your boy Neal back with another reaction video, guys. Here we are with 10 ways America messed me up. Before we jump into these 10 ways, jump into that subscribe button, ring notification bell, get a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. You guys got a favorite video suggestion, you can subscribe to Patreon or drop it in the comment section. What do you got?
G'day guys, welcome back to the channel.
G'day.
My name's Kaitlyn and I'm an American living in Sydney, Australia. I lived in the States for 30 years, a Philly girl, born and raised. Actually, never lived outside of Philly the entire time I lived in the US. And just over a year ago, I moved over here to Sydney. Recently, there was this TikTok trend that went kind of viral, particularly with people reacting to it here on YouTube. And that is ways that America really messed up Americans living abroad and American expats. So instead of just doing a quick little stitch and making a TikTok, I decided to also make a YouTube video about this. Because there are so many topics. Some of these topics might be predictable, some of them might be a little bit broad, some of them are very specific to my own experiences. But overall, I feel like this deserves more than a 3-minute stitch on TikTok. So let's start off 2023 with a bang. 10 ways that America really messed me up. So grab a Bicky, grab a cuppa, and let's jump right into this video.
Let's get it.
Number one is that if you want to get a well-paying job, you're going to have to go to college, you have to go to uni, and you have to take out student loan debt in order to do so. Unless you're one of the lucky few whose parents are either wealthy enough that they can afford it or have been saving since you were a baby and are now able to actually pay for your student loans. Typically, the vast majority of Americans, like myself, had to take out student loans at the young ages of 17 through 19. Some people might have gone to college a little bit later, but typically people going straight out of high school will go into uni and you're taking on tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt before you've even had the chance to really become an adult. Your brain isn't even fully formed until you're in your mid-20s. And here we are making it normal for young Americans to have to take on tens of thousands of dollars of student loan debt with this preconceived notion in mind that if you come out of college, you're going to have a well-paying job because you have this bachelor's degree. But the problem is so many people nowadays have bachelor's degrees, and it's actually very common for people to have bachelor's degrees in fields where they end up not working, or bachelor's degrees that, let's face it, unless you decide to get a PhD in something very particular, is pretty useless. How many people are going to get a job with a bachelor's degree in Scandinavian history or gender studies? This is very, very common. I have a friend who has a bachelor's degree in biology, but she sells glasses at an optometrist's office. It's very, very common over in the States for people to go pay a fortune for these bachelor's degrees with the expectation that you're going to be able to get a well-paying job. And back in like the 80s and 90s, that was very true. It was a basic return on investment, but after the financial crash of 2008, we all saw that that's not the case. A bachelor's degree in biology, but she sells glasses at an optometrist's office. This is very, very common over in the States for people to go pay a fortune for these bachelor's degrees with the expectation that you're going to be able to get a well-paying job. And back in like the 80s and 90s, that was very true. It was a basic return on investment, but after the financial crash of 2008, we all saw that that's not the case. And while fewer and fewer...
Facts. She's spitting straight facts. It's like nowadays, I feel like you don't really need... college is not a necessity like it was, like she said, back in the 80s and 90s where you would get that return on investment. Nowadays it's not really a necessity as it was back then. And so, but I feel like the way I grew up and the way a lot of people my age grew up was that like your parents always telling you like go to college, and it was like beat into your head, go to college, get a degree, get a good job. And when you go to school, what the teachers tell you, college. So the society, parents, everything's beating college into you, and so you do go to college, you do take out these loans, you do get a degree. I mean, that degree, unless it was something specific or anything, then like she said, you could have a biology degree, be working at an optometrist's office. Like, college isn't necessary anymore. Like, if you want to go to college, don't get it twisted. I'm not saying don't go to college. I'm saying don't feel like you have to go to college to get a good job. Don't feel like, you know what I'm saying? You don't. There's too many options out here nowadays. All right, but keep it going. So I feel everything she's saying right
2008, we all saw that that's not the case. And while fewer and fewer Gen Z are going into uni, typically the millennials in my generation have left college already. We are stuck paying off this mountain of student loan debt. I'm lucky enough that I was able to pay off my student loans by the time I was 30, but I know so few people who that's actually happened for, who I graduated with.
Yes.
They're still paying off their degrees. They're still paying off that debt. Overall, it wasn't worth it. I made some great friends. I had some great memories. I had some good times. It definitely was not worth starting off my adult life with $80,000 in student loan debt.
God
This
dang.
notion that going to college, going to uni over in the States is actually going to really give you a leg up is not always the case. It might be the case if you're going into business or finance or marketing, something that is going to be practical and useful, but telling 18-year-olds that it's okay to get a bachelor's degree in Scandinavian history is probably not doing them any favors. Along with history,
Kaitlyn, one thing I gotta ask, how you knock out 80K debt by the time you was 30? Like, God damn, whatever you doing, Kaitlyn, you definitely, yeah. I don't know what you do. I don't know what you, but knocking all that out by the time you was 30, you was getting paid nicely.
bachelor's degree in Scandinavian history is probably not doing them any favors. Along with history, another way that America really messed me up was telling me that American history is really the only history that you need to know. If you turn on the American news, about 95% of it is going to be what's going on in the States, and 5% is going to be random world news. Same thing in history classes. I remember out of the 12 years of education that I had all the way up to the end of high school, I start learning history up until 3rd grade, and then 3rd grade was very, very basic. Like, how many states are there? What's the color of the flag? Simple stuff that you would expect 3rd graders to learn when it comes to basic history. But then in 4th grade, all we learned was history of Pennsylvania. And in 5th grade, all we learned was history up to the Civil War, and 6th grade was Civil War to modern day. And then 7th and 8th grade, we dabbled in world history. And 9th through 10th grade, we dabbled in world history. But then in my 11th grade, we had AP American history. So many history classes are so America-centric and America-focused. I was shocked when I came over here and found out that America is not the reason that the Allies won World War II. I learned that as a 30-year-old. Because my American history classes had taught me for many, many years that the reason the Allies won World War II is because America dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan. Saying it didn't help end war efforts, but that's not the reason the Allies won World War II.
They definitely say it's definitely taught to us that way 100%. Was that, like, you know what I'm saying? When America jumped in the war, that's when, you know, it was basically America came in, wrapped it up. You know what I'm saying? That America came and saved the day. That's basically what's taught.
Didn't help end war efforts, but that's not the reason the Allies won World War II. Classrooms in America are so American history centered and America history focused that we really do lose touch with the fact that there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of other countries out there, all of whom have very rich histories. Yeah, talking about history, I do tend to feel like that dumb American because I didn't get a bachelor's degree in world history, and my typical up to year 12 history classes pretty much failed me in that regard. The third is going to trigger so many of those right-wing conservative nut jobs in the comments, and it's going to be interesting to see what they have to say about this. But the idea that socialized healthcare is actually terrible healthcare, that you are going to be taxed out of practically all of your money if we have a socialized healthcare system over in the States. That even if we did have a socialized healthcare system, the care itself would be absolutely terrible. I can say from firsthand experience here in Australia as somebody who's gone to the emergency room, somebody who's had surgery, somebody who's seen specialists, somebody who's seen GPs, somebody who's seen chemists, that the care over here in Australia is wonderful. There's not this idea of terrible socialized healthcare that a lot of conservatives have been spoon-fed through propaganda. I don't pay an absolute fortune in taxes over here in Australia. It's actually very comparable to what I paid over in the States. On top of that, I'm saving money because even though I am only just eligible to apply for Medicare, still don't have my Medicare card, I have private health insurance over here in Australia. My private health insurance is like a third of the price of what I was paying for health insurance over in the States, and it covers so much. I don't have a deductible I have to reach. I don't have to pay thousands of dollars if I have to go to the hospital, if I have to go see a specialist. On top of that, as somebody who's become kind of familiar with Medical Board of Australia's rules and AHPRA's rules over here, Australia does have pretty high standards and pretty high requirements. If you want to be a medically licensed professional over here in Australia, whether you're starting your training in Australia or you've been trained overseas and coming over to Australia, there are very strict rules that you have to adhere to. They're very strict about the training that you've had, particularly if you're coming from overseas, to make sure that it's at least somewhat comparable to people who've been trained in Australia. Doesn't mean that you're going to have to wait years and years for a life-saving surgery to happen. It doesn't mean you're going to be put on this list for years and years and years to get a necessary surgery done. And on top of that, it's affordable. People in Australia aren't going into medical debt. People aren't filing for bankruptcy over here for medical debt. So a socialized healthcare system doesn't mean it's bad care. It doesn't mean it's a bad system. It doesn't mean that it's a system that couldn't possibly work in the US. So much of that is propaganda that has been spoon-fed through lobbying. Think about how much money these insurance companies are getting out of Americans and then are paying to these groups to make sure that there is no universal healthcare system over in the States. Okay, I gotta move on to the next topic because
okay, little Amanda, because right now you are preaching. You are preaching all facts. I hear nothing but the truth coming out of your mouth. Yes, I don't. The idea that socialized healthcare is evil is definitely propaganda that is fed to Americans. Because they want us to keep us on the, they don't want universal healthcare. They want these insurance companies want to keep eating our pockets up. Because that's what they're doing. To pay for healthcare, they tear you up. And then you got to meet deductibles, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. But if you want a better healthcare, now you got to pay more money. And it makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Universal healthcare system over in the States. Okay, I gotta move on to the next topic because I will be here forever talking about healthcare if that's the case. And number 4 is a little bit more lighthearted, and that is that aircon needs to be on all the time, pretty much as soon as it hits 80 degrees over in the States. The shops are freezing cold. People's houses tend to be freezing cold. Work offices are freezing cold as soon as it hits basically spring weather. Whereas here in Australia, obviously the shops are going to have aircon, but they don't have it, so it's like frigid polar vortex weather in the middle of the shops. It's cool, it's comfortable, but it's not freezing, it's not frigid, and it's not on constantly. Like, it's reached about 87 degrees here in Australia so far. You can't quite tell because I'm wearing a sweater. It's actually a little bit chilly today. But last week it reached up to 87 degrees and we didn't rush to put the aircon on because, oh my gosh, it's hot, it's summer. No, you put the fans on, you open the windows, you enjoy the fresh air, and if it gets too much, then close everything up and put the aircon on. It's not that complicated. And offices over here aren't freezing cold like they are in the States. I worked in an office for about 6 years before COVID hit, and I remember how cold those offices were, especially in summer for some reason. It was so much colder in summer than it was in winter. I had a blanket, I had an extra sweater with me, I had a space heater under my desk that I would put on in July because it was so cold in the office. Not only does that waste so much energy, it also really decreases productivity. And not only does it waste so much energy, it's statistically shown that really cold areas, really cold offices actually decrease productivity. I know people from Sweden and South Africa and obviously Australia and New Zealand who've said that it is freezing cold over in the States because people have aircon on everywhere. It's almost like you can't get away from it. It is freezing all the time. Number 5 is that the Imperial System.
Yeah. I can't survive without my air conditioner. I ain't gonna lie to you. When it do get above 80, that AC coming on. If inside, it feels like, I feel like once it hits about 74 degrees inside, I gotta turn it on. Like, I don't know. I don't like the feeling of starting to feel hot. And like she said, since everywhere's so cold, your body gets used to that cold temperature. And so now, once your body starts getting hot at a lower temperature, right? And so yeah, I do keep my AC on a lot. It's on a lot. I ain't gonna lie.
Can't get away from it. It is freezing all the time. Number 5 is that the Imperial System is a perfectly reasonable and logical unit of measurement in this day and age. So comedian Jimmy Reeves did a really good, cute, quick video. I will link that down below on the Imperial System, and you will see just how out of whack, how ridiculous the entire concept of the Imperial System is. There's a reason that only 3 countries in the entire world use the Imperial System. Everybody else uses metric. In case you're wondering, those 3 countries are the US, Liberia, and Myanmar. So looking at that list, I think it just about says it all. On top of that, the metric system is what most scientists in the States use. It's what a lot of medical professionals use. That's what the military uses. There are so many professions that use the metric system on a regular basis, even over in the States. But for some reason, we are still using the imperial system. We're still using inches and miles. It's exhausting, you guys. Now, this is unfortunately a trend that's becoming a little bit more global, but it is very, very centric, especially in Gen Z and millennial mindsets, is that you have to work more than 40 hours a week if you want to live comfortably. Not even just get ahead, but live comfortably. I know a lot of Americans who have a full-time job and a side gig, or their own little small part-time business, or they have a part-time job. It's just to make...
We not doing a full-time and a part-time. But what she's saying is there's so many Americans who do that, like so many, and to be able to live comfortably, I feel like I guess I am comfortable. I mean, there are things that I guess I want, but if I check the price tag, I probably can't get, so it's not as comfortable as I like, but I live pretty decently, but I can't do that. A full-time job and a part-time, I don't even want to work a full-time.
Their own little small part-time business, or they have a part-time job. It's just to make ends meet over in the States. Now, as somebody over here, I do have a full-time office job, but I also do YouTube on the side, and I do make money off of YouTube. Part of that is because we're trying to get ahead, but if my partner and I wanted to just live comfortably, live with basically just getting by on the bare minimum and spend as little time working as possible, theoretically, I can quit my job. He can just work 40 hours a week and we would still make enough on just his income for us to at least have a roof above our heads, to pay for food, to pay for any emergencies that come up. But we're trying to save up. We're trying to get our own house.
That's where I am. You know what I'm saying?
To pay for any emergencies that come up. But we're trying to save up. We're trying to get our own house. We're trying to get ahead here. But I know so many Americans who are doing all this extra stuff, and instead of really getting ahead, they're just barely able to live comfortably. So there's almost this notion that you have to basically work yourself to death just to make ends meet for a lot of Americans. Obviously, that's not the case for all of them, and you can sit there and pick and point and say, oh, well, that person should have gone to college, or that person shouldn't have had a kid young, or that person should have dropped out of high school.
What they say, 63% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, including nearly half of six-figure earners. With persistent inflation eroding wage gains, the number of Americans living paycheck to paycheck is near a historic high, according to a recent report.
To college, or that person shouldn't have had a kid young, or that person should have dropped out of high school. There's so many instances where people can be nitpicky, but the reality is if you look at the numbers, you look at the broad statistics, a lot of people are barely able to make ends meet over in the States. And to be honest, it's also not a fault of their own. Minimum wage hasn't gone up since I had my very first job back in 2010. $7.50 an hour is not a livable minimum wage. On top of that, that goes into my next point, is that tipping is an acceptable system. Absolutely not. Why are we not paying waiters and waitresses at least the standard minimum wage across the board? Despite the fact that minimum wage should be higher anyway, why are we not paying them a reasonable minimum wage? You shouldn't have to rely on the generosity of your customers in order to make ends meet. And on top of that, it also really ruins the experience for the customers as well. At the end of the day, the only people that are really winning in the system are the businesses that are getting customers in because food prices aren't as high as they need to be, and because they're able to really underpay their staff. The fact that that's legal and is considered a fair system is absolutely ridiculous. And you can point to the very, very small margin of waiters and waitresses who make a livable wage off of the tips that they make, but that's so few people. Do you really think that the standard waiter or waitress at a Red Lobster or an Olive Garden or these chain restaurants is making enough to make ends meet on a standard week? Plus, on top of that, you have to rely on the generosity of getting enough hours and getting the right hours. You're probably going to make more on a Friday or Saturday night than you will on a Tuesday afternoon. So if you have a manager who just doesn't happen to like you, how are you going to be able to make ends meet on those tip days where you're working just afternoon shifts and you don't really have a really busy lunch crew and you're never able to get the weekend shifts and you're never able to get the evening shifts? There's so many things that factor into it that make it such an unfair and predatory system against people. Now, I'll link another video.
I gotta agree. All the waiters and waitresses I've known have made more money than me. But there's probably a great number out there who don't make a lot of money according to the tipping system. But as a customer, oh my gosh, she's completely right. Like, when I go out to eat, I have to think about like the food I'm gonna order, how much that's gonna cost, but then also the tip that I'm gonna have to leave. And you feel like obligated to tip because these companies don't have to pay these workers that much, waiter or waitresses that much. And so they do depend on your generosity. It's like an obligation to tip, and it's like, dang, bro, like it'll keep me from eating out a lot. Like, I'll just call it in. Tell you what I want, and I'll come pick it up and eat it at home because I don't want to pay any extra. Like, I shouldn't have to pay any extra. And so I completely agree on that. Companies are the only people that are winning in paying these workers below minimum wage. Like you said, minimum wage should be raised, but they're paying these workers below minimum wage, having them depend on the generosity of others. Companies are the only people winning in this process.
Into it that make it such an unfair and predatory system against people. Now, I'll link another video that was made by Legal Eagle talking about basically things in the Constitution that people think are there but aren't. One of those is the idea of taxation without representation. And there are a few very, very common instances where this is true. So as an American living abroad, I have to file taxes, and if I make a certain amount, I have to pay taxes to the US, despite that I have no representation as an expat abroad in Congress. I used to live in Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania state representatives aren't going to be interested in somebody who's living abroad. They're going to be interested in what's happening for the people who are living in their home state. I pay taxes theoretically, and technically I have no representation in Congress. I'm at least able to vote, but I have nobody who has my back when it comes to what's going on with rules and laws and legislation. And if you want something a little bit more concrete and a little bit closer to home, think about the 16-year-olds who are camp counselors, the people who are under 18 who aren't able to vote but have part-time jobs or summer jobs. They're not able to vote, but they're still getting taxes taken out of their paychecks. So taxation without representation is a real thing. It's not a constitutional right. It's not a law. And there are millions, I mean millions of us that have to file and pay taxes every year to a government that gives us absolutely no representation. Number 9 is you're a bad employee.
I don't understand that one. I really don't get, if you move out of America, I don't think you should have to pay taxes to America because you don't live here anymore. I don't know. That was
to a government that gives us absolutely no representation. Number 9 is you're a bad employee if you take time off work. If you're sick and you don't come in, or if you're sick and you don't have a doctor's note, you're just overall a bad employee. There's this guilt trip that is given to so many American employees that if they take time off work, then the rest of their coworkers are going to be burdened with having to do their work while they're out. And it ties into that whole we're a family thing with a lot of companies over in the States. I remember I needed to take half a day off to go help with a funeral for my great aunt, and my manager guilt tripped me so much for giving her last minute notice the day before that I needed to take a half day off on a Friday afternoon to go over to Jersey to help my mom get ready for this funeral. So many Americans get guilt tripped into this idea that you need to come in even if you're sick. It doesn't matter if you have a cold or the flu. Come in anyway, and if you get your coworker sick, they're going to have to come in anyway. It doesn't really matter. You don't have a ton of sick time to use up anyway, and so many Americans are afraid that what if they get sick later on in the year? What happens if they've used up their 5 sick days? And then they get a really bad cold, or they get a flu maybe in December. They've used up all their sick days for the year, so they're going to have to come in. People try to use as few sick days as possible over in the States, and they will come in if they have a flu, if they have a cold. if they have a sore throat, and if they get somebody else sick, then they pretty much shrug it off and say, oh well, too bad, that person's just going to end up coming in anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So frustrating that companies don't care about their employees' health whatsoever. And I know that it's more their job to make money, but I also know so many companies in other countries actually want to make sure that their employees aren't coming in if they're sick, or they're finding a way to let them work from home if they have a doctor's appointment or something earlier in the day, instead of making them come into the actual office and then leave. There's so many other things that, especially in a post-COVID world, we know that companies are able to make reasonable accommodations, yet so few of them are in the States. And this last one's going to trigger some more people in the comments, and it's going to be funny to see exactly what people have to say on this one. And that is that an American's right to bear arms is more important than their right to be safe. Not feel safe, but
yeah, you're going to make a lot of people mad for sure, but you need to preach this.
Their arms is more important than their right to be safe. Not feel safe, but to be safe. Why is it that America has a right to bear arms, and yet at the same time there are so many mass shootings and school shootings, to the point that there are so many of them that even international news can't cover most of them unless they are extreme? I didn't know there was a mass shooting in Philly until people on Facebook started posting that they were safe from what was going on back home. That's the only way I found out. It wasn't exactly news over here in Australia, because there were dozens of mass shootings going on in those couple weeks. International news can't cover every single school shooting and mass shooting that's going on over in the States, and that is so sad. I mean, it's such an America-centric problem. This isn't a problem that other first world countries have, and yeah, they don't have the right to bear arms, but it doesn't mean that you can't get a gun over here in Australia. Actually, I'm considering making a video and trying to get a gun in 2023 if I don't need permanent residency or citizenship in order to do so. If I can, I might show you what the process is actually like, because I know quite a few gun owners over here in Australia. You have certain requirements that you have to meet. You have to have a gun safe. You have to have keys to the gun safe. There are these rules in place, but there's been no mass shootings in Australia since the 90s. The fact that teachers have to teach kindergarteners how to hide in place and be quiet and have active shooter drills in kindergarten is so disgusting. How do people think that that's acceptable? How do people think that that's okay? And why is it that somebody's right to own an AK-47 is more important than making sure that your kid is going to go to school and won't get shot? I feel like I need a drink after filming this video. This is going to be a tough one, you guys. This is going to be a tough pill for some people to swallow, and I'm sure the comments are going to light up like the 4th of July. But that's it for this video, you guys. Is there anything on this list that surprised you? I feel like most of this stuff is pretty common and pretty well known, but those are 10 ways that America really messed me up. So if you like this video, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button down below. It does help support me and help support this channel, you guys. I'm sure after this there are going to be plenty of people who won't want to support me, and that is totally okay, because you know what? That is the beauty of the internet. That is the beauty of both America and Australia and many other countries, is that many other countries have the right to freedom of speech. That's not just an American thing. So that's it for this video, you guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Hey, she was preaching. She was preaching. If you don't like it, get over it. But that's all we got for this. You guys got a favorite video suggestion? You can subscribe to Patreon or drop it in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell, give the video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. Social media and Patreon are all up top. You don't subscribe to any of it, put all the links in the description. All you gotta do is hit the link, follow me, talk to me. Love talking to you guys. You guys are the most incredible team on YouTube. It's your boy Neal. Out.